Welcome to HeCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. As always, I am Mike Chisholm. As always, I'm excited to sit down and have meaningful conversations around the world of men's mental wellness and all of the different directions that open-ended topic can go. Before we get to our amazing guest today, if you haven't, let's do some housekeeping. If you haven't downloaded the He Changed It app yet, what the heck are you waiting for? Head on over to hechangedit.com. Check out the mission as to what this amazing company is doing, and then download it on your device, whether you got the Apple or you got the Android. We are non-denominational with our technological preferences. Download the He Changed It app right now. Check out what's going on and watch the process of us trying to change the world and make the world a better place, starting with men's mental wellness. And it's going to go into so many other amazing places as well. Today, I have a very, very fun guest. And I say that because he and I have a phenomenal dynamic outside of this. And it's just been a matter of us circling each other to make this happen. Mark Gordon is here. Now, Mark Gordon is the father of Justin Gordon. Justin Gordon is the drummer for a band called Proper Man. If you watched our He Changed It special, the Proper Man Conversations series of podcasts, Justin was in there. We recorded that day when we were finished. Actually, I think even right in the middle of the podcast, he even said to me, he goes, "You need to meet my dad." And boy, was he right. Mark Gordon is here today. He is a leadership coach. Here's the term I love: a relationship catalyst. Today's episode is going to be a lot about relationships. Mark, I am really, really excited that you're here today. Thank you very much for letting me take advantage of our dynamic and our friendship to have you on HeCast today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be with you, Mike. We've had such great conversations, and so it just makes sense to bring it to the world.
One thing that, and we're going to get into it, we're going to talk about relationships and whatnot today. The word that we like to use, and I think it's safe to say when we have a conversation, they're very intentional.
Yes.
We're very present.
Mm-hmm.
We're very mindful, and really at the end of the day, there's not a lot of autopilot, even though there's a comfortability that can be there. Would you say that intention and mindfulness is a silver bullet when it comes to relationships?
Yeah, it's absolutely essential. And I think that it's also on the opposite side of those two things. It also can be very destructive. So if we are living by accident and we're just kind of, fumbling through life and we don't really have a goal, vision, mission in our lives or a purpose. I always say we don't want to live by accident. We want to live on purpose. So when we live on purpose and we intentionally invest in our relationships, I believe that they actually grow. It's like anything, where you invest grows. And so I believe that, and I believe everything flows out of relationship. So everything flows out of relationship. It all starts with it. If you think about it in a family, in a business, any environment you're in, it flows out of relationship. And that's why it's so important to be intentional about it.
You talk about how you're a leadership coach. So much of what, just to build on what you just said there, I mean, when you're coaching leaders, is most of it teaching them how to have better relationships with people? Is that, or is that,
It is. Actually, most of my coaching and my speaking are around relationships, how to develop a healthy relational culture.
Yeah.
And then also I attack some subjects that will affect negatively relationships. So I have a workshop that's called Punching Shame in the Face. It's called Shadow Boxing, and the subtitle's Punching Shame in the Face, because shame is just a cancer to relationships. It's so difficult. See, I think there's probably three primary relationships everybody has. One will be with their creator or, a higher power, whatever you want to give it.
That as,
And the next one, though, that we don't often overlook is our relationship with ourselves. How do we relate to ourselves? In my book, Relationship Matters, I even write that if we're on the side of a mountain somewhere, completely alone, we still have to learn how to relate. We have to relate with our environment. We have to relate with ourselves. Otherwise we go crazy, right? And I think that, even mental health struggles absolutely come out of broken relationships, out of hurt and pain.
Mm-hmm.
And when trauma has not been dealt with, it'll affect negatively the relationships. And so I do workshops on how to overcome shame, how do we get past it? How can we live and develop a healthy relationship with ourselves so that we can actually then have healthy relationship with others, which is the third type of relationship.
It's so funny how, and I want to get to number one. And I want to talk about number one, because again, that is such a different concept for everybody, whatever that higher power is, that spiritual, the spiritual side, whatever that, that is, for folks. Because an atheist can still have a relationship with a higher power, right? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. Like,
we're still made up with spirit, soul, and body, right? We have three parts of everybody. And so those three parts all have to learn how to relate to each other. And so I think that's why it's difficult sometimes for atheist or agnostic. It might be very difficult for them to tap into that, only because if they don't believe in a higher power or a God, then it makes it very difficult to really understand that. But you see, the problem is a lot of time our value comes from what other people say to us or what we say to ourselves.
Yeah.
And for me, my journey, I had to come to that place where I believed in something greater than myself, because my self messages and messages from others around me were actually very negative.
Right.
And so I had developed this really healthy, from childhood, a healthy fear of failure. And so my identity was wrapped around that instead of who I actually was.
Okay.
And so the decisions I made, the addiction I struggled with, the anger management problems that I had, all came out of this deep misunderstanding of my value. And when you have a higher power, in my case, God, it was like, oh, okay, so what does he say about me? What would he think of me? And if he was my creator, well, he didn't make me by accident. He had a purpose in creating me. And I believe that it was for a relationship. I think that anybody that creates has a relationship with what they create, with the creation they make, right? And so it really helped me start to break it all down and understand that, you know what? We all live by faith in this life. We have to have faith to live
in something.
Right. Right. Because assumption's the enemy of faith. And if you want to believe in somebody or have faith in someone, you've got to, you can't have assumptions. So you've got to have a journey. And so my journey was that I just challenged and said, well, God, if you're real, because I didn't believe, if you're real, you better reveal yourself to me.
Yeah.
And in my case, he did, obviously. And that changed my life. It changed everything, because I started seeing myself through a different lens.
Right.
And then I could start relating with myself properly. That was my
that led to the relationship with yourself.
My healing journey. And people will ask me, well, how do you how do you know?
Yeah.
And I always tell people, because if it's pride either puffs up or covers up.
Yes.
So pride is actually not a positive emotion. Now, I'm not saying, proud of your kid when they do well in sports. I'm not talking about that kind of pride. I'm talking about this.
Yeah.
I always say, if you show me the most arrogant person, I'll show you the most insecure.
Yeah.
Because it's a persona, right? Yeah. We have to put that persona out there. I talk about that in the shame course, is that we develop shadow material where we have to cut the actual parts of ourselves out emotionally, but we have to replace it with something. You can't just live that way. And so we replace it with persona. We replace it with ego.
Yeah. And
when that happens, then it's pride. So in my healing journey, what I discovered is the more I got to know myself and to know that I was loved, that I was capable of loving and capable of being loved. What I started to realize that humbled me. Mm-hmm. That brought gratitude into my life that I'd never felt before. I had entitlement most of my life because I was always fighting against the rage and the anger. And so I had this entitlement that people owed me something, that the world owed me something. And that led
a lot of people who think that right now, who are in these stages of entitlement.
Right. And what that is actually is a form of pride. And so when I started to heal and I started to realize that I had value, mm-hmm. that I actually could contribute value. And for me, a big piece was discovering my purpose. So in my relationship with a higher power, I discovered that I was actually created for relationship, but also I discovered I was created for a purpose.
Mhm.
And many men, especially men, don't understand their purpose. We put all our value into our work, our money, our toys,
Yeah.
our things that don't matter. But when I realized that, wow, my value is intrinsic, it came because I was created by love. And so now I actually have value. When I started to go down that journey and discover that value, what happened is I discovered my purpose, and it was this simple: I'm an encourager.
Yeah.
That is who I am.
And you
I
are absolutely
am an encourager.
Yep.
I was put on this earth to encourage other people.
Yeah.
And so my whole life now, and it's gotten to the point now where I make my living from encouraging. I do everything I do is encouragement. But early in the season of my healing journey, what it meant was I can't encourage people if I'm being angry all the time.
Right.
I can't live out who I really am if I'm going to keep defaulting to these old behavior patterns.
This stuff's getting in the way of who I actually am.
And so even addiction,
Yeah.
people, I do a lot of work with people coming through addiction because I came through it. And so I speak at different addiction places quite regularly. And what I discovered is like, it never did feel right. I ask them that all the time. Your addiction and the behavior that followed it never felt right, did it? It never felt like it was who you were.
Yeah.
And yet
It was
many
distraction.
times you would say, well, that's just who I am.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, deep down, you knew that wasn't who you were. And it never felt right to me, these things that I was doing and the way I was behaving. And when I discovered that I was to be an encourager, it all made sense. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm here to encourage people. I'm here to encourage them. And so then that changed my behavior.
Mhm.
Because I adopted who I started to relate to myself. Well, that means I got to start by encouraging myself. I can't let these negative loops keep playing in my head
Mhm.
because that's what was happening. I kept having these negative self-talk and I'm a loser. I'm just a failure. I'm never going to amount to anything, because
Mhm.
those were the words I heard growing up.
The big one that I hear more and more from guys who open up and are vulnerable is I'm not enough.
Yes. Yeah.
Like the I'm the loser one. I know there are guys who feel that way for sure, and they get down on themselves if
Right.
they don't perform well or they don't provide enough or whatever. But the I am not enough one
Right.
seems to be the one that's really under the armor for a lot of guys that they even have a hard time expressing that.
Yeah.
I've seen guys, the tough as nails,
Yeah.
but the moment they come to grips with the idea that they might not be enough, it reduces them to tears.
Right.
Like it's just,
My
it's
work
so
with,
crumbling.
In my work with couples, that really gets exposed because, our wives can be the first one to tear us down
Sure.
the quickest, because if we do something in our own effort, but it hasn't communicated well, then we feel like we can never be enough for them. We're never going to do enough. We can never be enough. And that's just not true. That's just not true. It's way simple. I always say the things I say are simple, not easy, but we've got to, we got to understand that what is our motive? If our motive is just to please someone else, then we're always going to feel like we're not enough, because it's not our responsibility to please someone else.
Yeah.
I'm enough because I'm going to live authentically. And by the way, my definition of authentic is doing the best you can with what you have.
Oh, there you go.
Same definition for success.
Yeah.
Doing the best you can with what you have. And so wherever you are,
The same
today,
definition as success.
Yes,
Authenticity and success are the same thing. Just doing the best I can with what I have.
exactly.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah.
That takes the pressure off for a lot of people. If
Yeah.
you think of it that way, if that was the bar that we literally would measure ourselves with at the end of the day or the week or whatever it is,
That's right.
did I do the best with what I had? Truly.
So guess
and if
what?
you had-
Accountability comes into play then,
Sure.
Mike, right? Because now I can be accountable. Did I do the best I could with what I had? Actually, I didn't.
Yeah.
I can be accountable. I'm going to do better next week.
Yeah.
But you see, this ideal of striving for perfection isn't real, because there's nobody that's perfect.
No.
And I think a lot of times people think that I'm not enough because I'm not perfect. But actually, there's a lot of stages between perfect, at which we never achieve.
Absolutely.
So excellence is what I want to go for. That's doing the best you can with what you have.
Yeah.
And so we want to work in excellence.
It's funny to go back to the, to the original kernel of where we started this, the idea of something bigger than ourselves. And it's funny because it isn't about religion in any way. Some of the most religious people I know are some of the most spiritually dead people I know too, because all they focus on is the is the tasks or the laws or whatever you want to call it.
Transactional, not relational.
Okay, and you look at our world this in this day and age, and the tribalism that has sprouted up, whether it is a political, whether it's what type of device I use, people are always going into teams, and then you talk about things like shame. I think about cancel culture and things. It's all a bunch of crap that seems to be there to distract people from doing what you're talking about, which is asking the philosophical, the existential questions, the searching part. If people are just too busy pointing fingers, hoping that the finger never gets pointed at them, they're not going to take that time for that introspection. Right. And that introspection leads to whatever that looks like. Use the higher power example, whatever that looks like, which then leads to you building a relationship and a dynamic with yourself. Right. And then we start talking about others. Right. And that's what it leads to. But the idea of preparing for the relationship with others makes so much sense. How can you have a relationship with someone else if you're not in league with yourself, or at least you don't even know who you are? Yeah. Do you find that there's a lot of guys out there who don't know who they are?
Absolutely. Yeah. So many talk to me and say that to me. Like, they know when it comes to work, I know, like, I'm really good at what I do. When it comes to personal relationships, they haven't got a clue. Yeah. And it's because we haven't done that work. You hit it right on the head. And one of the reasons, by the way, that they don't go into that zone and don't do that work is because of shame. Now, shame, a lot of people carry shame that don't know they're carrying shame. This isn't, it is overt. It's like a fungus. It grows and grows, but we aren't always aware of it. We don't always have self-awareness. And so what I've discovered is, if I admit, this is with people, if I admit that I'm this terrible person, that I've made mistakes, that I've done these things in my life, then it's going to prove that my shame is right. And they don't want to face that. But the truth is, it's the opposite. Yeah. When you actually go through that work and you discover that you actually do have value, and the things you've been doing that cause shame have actually never been a part of you. It's not your identity at all. And unless you do that work, you don't discover that, and you keep going through life. And the word resentment quite often is referred to as frozen anger. And so what happens is we build resentments. Yeah. And then we sit at, water boils at 212 and we're sitting at 200 all the time. And then we just boil over. It's so easy. And that's the reason, is because we haven't dealt with those deeper resentments, because we haven't dealt with, who are we? Yep. Who were we designed to be? What were we put on this earth for? And if it's not relationships, I don't know what it is, because everything flows out of relationships. And so that if we could actually grab that and get healthy relationships, it's amazing. Every other area of your life will become successful.
Isn't that funny? So it's literally a domino that starts, that can cascade into something much more powerful, but it starts with you. It starts
and if we really go ahead of the game, if we want to change, I wanted to change the next generation. I didn't want to do to my kids what was done to me. And often I hear people say, I'll never be my father. And I said that, but I became exactly him. You can't live to be not something. You have to be living to be something, to live out your purpose. And I think that's a big thing for men. If we could just realize, you know what, we actually have the ability, we have the capability of having healthy relationships. We may not, we got to learn how to emote properly. We got to learn, like most guys want to just turn their emotions off. The problem is, if you turn them off, you turn off the good ones too. And then you're just a zombie walking through life, right? The Walking Dead. And because if you turn off your emotions, that doesn't work. Or if you don't learn how to manage your emotions, then it goes to the other extreme. Where they actually take you over. So your emotions are controlling you instead of you managing them. And this comes down to, if we have time, it comes down to this. We need to have a healthy self-worth. Yeah. Now, what's made up of self-worth? Self-esteem, self-image, and self-dignity. Self-esteem is how I feel about myself. That's how I feel about myself. If your narrative is negative all the time in your head about who you are as a person, and you feel terrible about yourself, and it might be legitimate because you grew up hearing that, like I did, but is it it might be legitimate, but is it my responsibility or is it someone else's responsibility? It's my responsibility
Absolutely.
to deal with that, right?
Might not be your fault, but it's your
Yeah.
responsibility.
So I have to challenge that thought. I
Yep.
want to feel good about myself. Self-image is how you see yourself.
Yes.
Okay. And then self-dignity is how you treat yourself. So if I don't feel good about myself and I don't see myself in the right light and I don't treat myself well, i.e. addiction or other things,
Mhm.
workaholic, whatever, then I'm not going to see others, feel good about others. I'm not going to see them in the right light and I'm not going to treat them well. They go hand in hand. So where do I start?
Yeah.
This is where this searching, looking inside your heart. I have found that the one in the middle changes the other two. Self-image is where it all starts.
Really?
Yeah. If you can change the way you see yourself,
Yeah.
if you can choose and say, I chose to see myself as an encourager, guess what happened? I started feeling good about myself anytime I encouraged somebody. And then I realized, I can't encourage others if I'm not encouraging myself. So guess what? I started treating myself well. Self-dignity started coming in. So this whole idea of self-care and, in our era, when we grew up, it was selfish to think of yourself.
Right.
But we got to realize, no, we've got to think of ourselves enough to get to know ourselves enough so that we can be there for the others that we love.
Yeah.
And it's not selfish at all. It's actually the bravest thing you can do is to actually look at this and say, I'm going to choose to look at myself differently from now on. I'm going to rewrite the story. I might have experienced all these negative things in my life. I might have dealt with shame and all these things. But I'm telling you, when you change your self-image and you start to gain self-worth,
Yep.
you start to grow and you start doing the best you can with what you have. It pulls it all together in that concept. And so for men, that is the greatest gift we can give our loved ones is to actually start working on ourselves, start to actually get to know yourself, start to see yourself in the right light. I started seeing myself as a good father. So I became a good father. I started seeing myself as a good husband. So I started before, if my wife asked me for something, it was like,
Yeah.
and then I didn't do it with my full heart. And then she would complain about, not getting it done. And then I felt like I wasn't enough.
Yep.
And it just proved I was a failure. I had to overcome that by looking at it and saying, no, I want to be a good husband. I love blessing my wife. I love doing things for her. And it changed my attitude and the way I felt about myself. And guess what? It changed the way she saw me too.
Yeah.
Because people around you will start seeing you the way you imagine yourself. Facade doesn't change somebody's opinion of you other than negative. Like when you try to live out of ego, actually it fails you. It's going to cause more pain.
Yeah.
And it's going to just confirm all your fears.
It's funny. These little things that come around the backside, and there's all sorts of different analogies for it. We've talked about this on the show before. You're in the airplane and the pressure, the cabin pressure drops down to zero. Maybe you're in one of those Boeing planes where the door flies off. I don't know.
Yeah.
And suddenly the masks come down.
Yeah.
You got your kid beside you, right?
Right.
Naturally, what do you want to do? I want to put the mask on my kid first, but that is not what you do. You're supposed to put your mask on.
Right.
Those in-flight infomercials that we all ignore all the time. They say it.
Right. And why do we do that? Because we need to be present.
We need to be okay
to help them.
Absolutely.
Right.
If you get their mask
Great
on,
analogy.
but then you don't get your mask on and something happens to you, great, they live, but you're no longer there to take care of them.
I'll give you another
Sure.
a plane analogy.
Yeah.
In life, if you want to be successful and do the best you can of what you have, you need a 2-wing plane to fly. One wing is your gifting, your value, your personhood. The other one is your character. So your gifting is one, your character is the other.
What you do with it.
Right. And a lot of people misunderstand character. People will say, well, you develop character through hard times. Actually, I believe hard times reveal your character so you know what to work on.
Oh, yeah.
Let's reverse it a bit,
Yeah.
right? So your gifting
They're the test of
is
what your character
is
is.
one wing, and a lot of guys get their value from their gifting.
Yes.
And so they put all their energy into the gifting and they produce results, but it doesn't fly.
No.
It just keeps spiraling out.
Yeah.
The relationship spiraling out. How many marriages have broken up because of that very reason, right?
Absolutely.
But if we don't have the character wing going, and what's the fuel is self-worth. That's the fuel on the plane.
Yeah.
That keeps us going forward, is to know that we're what, and self-worth is not arrogance or pride. Self-worth actually humbles me and makes me grateful for who I was designed to be.
Well, you go back to that intentional thing. Another example too, is where sometimes it comes around the bend is generosity.
Yeah.
Totally. I heard somebody who's he's a multi-millionaire, and he had a quote, and somebody was saying to him about how generous he is, and he just looked at it. He said, "Well, it's a selfish pursuit."
Right.
Like, what? It's a selfish pursuit. Yes, I am. But it makes me feel so good.
Yeah.
To be generous.
Yeah.
That it's an actual selfish pursuit.
Right.
You use the example of your wife wants you to do something, right? If we can just become intentional in that moment and go, okay, you know what? I'm going to do this for whatever reason. I'm going to do it with a good heart. I'm going to do it with a good, it comes around on the back end.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing about being mindful and intentional, like how we started this whole thing. It's that when you do that, a lot of the time, these little hidden bonuses that may not be apparent right from the start in this self-service culture that we live in, they start coming around, and that's the good stuff. That's the stuff that actually can grow substance.
Yeah. Yeah. It's farming, right? You plant a seed, you nurture the seed, and then the seed starts to grow. Eventually it produces a crop, and then you harvest, but you got to then take care of the land again. And it's a continual cycle. And that's what relationships are. We plant the seeds, we are intentional, and we will get a harvest from it. My wife and I last June had our 40th anniversary. In my addiction, we separated at one point. I thought our family was not going to make it. Yeah. And somehow we were able to come back together and heal with our family. And we have a fantastic family. We get along and have great relationships with all our kids, and they have great relationships with each other. And that is all, my grandkids. It's like but that didn't happen overnight because, some magical pill was taken. It was a fight. It was intentional. It's what I call power of being present. Yeah. If I've got all this garbage thinking inside me, how can I be present for someone else? How can I be present for myself? Yeah. How can I be present? We men especially tend to ignore something or push it down so we don't have to deal with it. And that creates collateral damage in our mental health. It creates collateral damage in our relationships. Yeah. It's much better to deal with it as it comes. It might be uncomfortable. A lot of times it's because people have the wrong view of conflict. Conflict's actually a gift. Right. Conflict is an invitation to go deeper in the relationship. Absolutely. It's to learn and understand each other more. It's not about fighting a battle of the wills and me trying to, I'm going to win. It's not about conquering. It's actually about, it's about relationship. It's about being able to converse and to get to know my bride better, to get to know my kids better. Why? So I always ask now, where's this conflict coming from? Yeah. It also is an invitation for me to look inside me. Yeah. Because sometimes those old patterns pop up, right? Yeah. Left unaware. Well, we default to our old patterns. If it is pride, it is I'm going to conquer. Right. That it becomes that, right? That's kind of a litmus test. And then I'll say, oh, where did that come from? Yeah. Like, where did that come from? That happened to me recently, not with family, but in business. And something was said and I reacted to it. And then later in that night, I kind of was sitting and reflecting and thinking, why did I react to that? What was going on inside of me? It had nothing to do with the other person. That's usually the case. Often when we get defensive and insecure, it's really nothing to do with us. No. It's a cause and effect in the other person's life. Yeah. And something's going on inside of them. It's seldom, if you think about it, when you've had a fight or an argument, and later you can't even, what were we arguing about? I can't even remember. Or what triggered that? It has really usually nothing to do with what started the fight. Yeah. It's something cause and effect going on deeper in. So conflict's inviting you to go deeper. Why did that upset you so much? How can I help? I turn in from being a judgmental, I turn into, and defensive, I turn into, how can I help?
Yeah.
How can I serve in this situation?
It's so funny. And I don't know when it showed up in my, actually I do know when it showed up. I had a dad with anger issues. And so, early on I learned this, and I'm so grateful for it.
Mhm.
Again, how many good things can come from things that don't start out good. And
Yeah.
that baffles me, and how so many times something ugly can turn into something beautiful or whatever. But, and it's almost to this point though, because I have always really enjoyed confrontation. And as you know, that's, and I've come to learn, that's not necessarily what the average person, some people aspire to that. They grow to learn that. They learn it through personal development or whatever. I've just always been a guy that confronts things, many times. Confrontation leads to resolution.
Right.
And it's the opposite of procrastination. Like, to me, it's always like, oh, we're going to confront this now. Good. We're going to get through it.
Yeah.
And now it's not just going to be hanging there.
Yeah.
And how many things do we all have in our lives that are just been hanging there for years and years and years and years and years? And that creates a whole bunch of, static that we have to, maneuver our life
Frozen
through.
anger.
Yeah. Frozen anger, resentment. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
When we confront something, but yet the fear of confrontation is so great in so many. I think particularly guys, because it comes with vulnerability.
Yeah.
And because when you want to confront something, many times you have to, unless you attack, you have to be vulnerable.
Well, and if we're gut honest here, sometimes when we're transparent and we do that, reveal things about our heart, then it's used against us.
Absolutely.
It can be used against us. But if we authentically are transparent, I often say intimacy is into me you see. If we want if we want emotional connection, emotional intimacy, not physical.
Is that in the book?
Okay. It's into me you see. And I want to be transparent. It's one of the things that builds trust in a relationship.
Yes.
The trust is is the corner pillar of 5 pillars in my book that create healthy relationships. And so if I can be transparent authentically, I don't care what they do with it. It's not my responsibility.
Exactly.
My responsibility was to be transparent. If my wife wants to use that against me in a moment of anger, I know that that's cause and effect for her. She's grasping at something because
she's picking up a stone.
She's hurt.
Yep.
There's something going on.
Yeah.
And so I am not going to take it personally any longer. I don't get angry on reaction anymore because she's telling me something. And I need to discover what it is. It has nothing to do with the stone that was picked up.
No, see.
It has to do with something deeper in her heart.
And that's the fear versus the reaction. The fear of being transparent and revealing the self that it's going to be used to attack me. Okay, very real scenario. The fear is rightful. However, the reality is once you actually are transparent, you get a whole bunch of bonus stars, whatever you want to call it, bonus, and then if that stone is picked up to be thrown at a later date or whatever, it's a different scenario than the fear of it. It's actually, it's an empowerment thing.
Remember,
and you can almost.
Fear is an acronym for false evidence appearing real.
There you go.
So often fear lies to us. Fear tells us partial truths to convince us that it must be true or whatever. And I think if you remove fear, and perfect love removes fear, when you have love in your heart, it removes fear. So when I can love myself humbly, like proper love I'm talking about, knowing myself, building a relationship with myself, I can be transparent because nobody has leverage against me now because it's all out in the open. Oh, you can throw that stone if you want, but it actually doesn't affect me the same way.
Yeah.
Because I know who I am. I know my value. And I know, and by the way, I accept myself, the good parts and the bad parts. I don't have a problem saying I can make a mistake.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem.
Yep.
It's because I've reconciled that to myself. So now I can be transparent in an authentic way. And what I've discovered is when it's in that level, it's actually not used against me. It actually bonds us and it solves the problem, whatever it was that my wife wanted to pick the stone up for.
Yeah.
I can actually converse and communicate through that problem without getting hit by stones. And so we think that's what's going to happen because it has happened to us, but we actually have, when we do that, when we get defensive and we try to control a situation, we're actually giving our power away to the other person and we're not actually finding a solution. So we live with the consequences of that.
Yeah.
And we don't have the power to deal with it anymore because we've given it over to the person we're angry at, given it over to the person we have resentment towards. And then they own us. They live rent free in our heads. Even if you've divorced and you've moved on, they can still affect your new marriage or your new relationships because they're still living there. Until we reconcile with ourselves and understand that we have value and that we can develop self-worth and we can see ourselves in a proper way so that we can start to become the man we know we are, then it takes all those leverages away and we become healthy. Now we can love others unconditionally. Now we can see conflict as a gift.
Yeah, we can take it out for a spin.
Exactly.
You know, you talk about this. It's again going back. If we had a theme for this, for today's episode, it probably would be intention. You know, when for sure. You know, you think about when you have the autopilot engaged and somebody does something that creates an emotional response. You know, getting defensive, attacking, doing whatever. Right. I think you did a really good job there, just articulating what happens when we do that. We give away the power. We, you know, we're now in for a ride of outcomes that we probably don't want. But that one little interruption, that one little being able to kind of step outside of yourself and look at yourself and analyze the situation, become mindful, become intentional, can change everything. It can change everything. It can keep you squarely in the driver's seat. It can let you put a filter of love, you know, before you speak, you know, over your ears, a filter of love as you're hearing things. So you don't, you know, you're literally in the driver's seat still. Do you know of any ways that, is it just practice makes perfect? Like, how is it that people can become, can kind of make that awakening momentarily happen to go, oh, wait a second. I shouldn't have I should have my hands on the wheel. It should not be the autopilot right now.
I do have an answer for that actually. And it's brain science. A lot of times, you know, I know me as an angry guy when I was younger, and I'll tell you a story in a minute about that. But it's like, I know that our brain has what's called autoresponders. And so the primal part of our brain's at the base of our neck. And
the reptilian brain.
The reptilian brain.
Yeah.
At the top of that is called the amygdala. That's so the reptilian brain is a CPU. It just stores all the information of your life. In fact, it stores everything, like your heart rate, your like everything your body has to do, and everything that you've experienced in life. And then the amygdala will store the emotion that went with the experience. Okay, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. In the middle of your brain is the neurocortex. The neurocortex is a translator. So it's trying to translate or assess what you're going through in any given minute. And then it releases the appropriate chemicals in your brain to deal with it. Okay. The prefrontal cortex is at the front of your head. This is the reasoning part of your brain. The reasoning part of your brain can sit and reason through things. Okay. We can sit and say, oh, we can see the cause and effect. I can, you know, what kind of man do I want to be? What kind of person? I can pause myself by using the prefrontal cortex. Here's the problem. When the autoresponder is triggered, when my reptilian brain is in control, it sends a message to the neurocortex that says, we're in danger. It's like if you come across over the hill and you see a bear on its hind feet, it's like the same fight or flight. It's the same emotion. In fact, by the way, anger and passion is the same word in the Hebrew language. It's just different ends of the scale. Oh, that's the same emotion. Passion. So I'm passionate about my work, passionate about my family, passionate about relationships. But on the negative, before my healing, I was angry at relationships. I was angry at same emotion. Anyway.
Well, like the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. You know,
exactly,
because it takes tremendous emotion on both sides, or selfishness. It takes tremendous emotion on both sides to do both. That makes sense.
So what happens with our brains is we have these autoresponders. So the neurocortex is releasing adrenaline into my bloodstream. And if you can picture a snow globe, you shake it, that's what your prefrontal cortex, you get 1,000 thoughts a second when you're angry. When you're in crisis mode and you're angry, it's like, I can't gather one thought. And so I react out of the primal part of my brain. I react out of that. And so let me give you an illustration of autoresponders. The first one is red light. What do you do when you come to a red light?
Stop.
Right. But you don't have to say, right foot, please come off gas pedal, make your way to the brake, gently press until you come to a complete stop.
Yeah.
You don't even think about it.
No.
Your brain has been trained so much, your neuroplasticity has been trained so much that your whole body knows what to do when you see a red light. In the same way, that's how we change what you just asked, your question. We have to change our neuroplasticity to be geared towards self-worth.
Yeah.
We have to other things. So what happens
To
is
become alert during that situation where it's
right.
like, yeah, you know what? I need to think about what I say before I say it.
Right. So I'll tell you a story from my life. When I was a kid, I had the fear of failure because nothing I did was ever good enough. I never felt like enough. I always was told what I did wrong instead of what I did strong.
Mm-hmm.
And so I grew up that way. And I had experiences where people would tell me that I was a failure because I couldn't do something the right way. I would have on my report card regularly, it said, if Mark, showed some effort, he'd do better, whatnot. And so now fast forward, I'm working for this guy. And he's telling me I did something wrong. Now, he didn't do it meanly or rudely or anything, but him telling me that I didn't do something right created an auto response in my brain because the amygdala thought, our brains can't tell fantasy from real.
No.
So when you think something, it thinks you're experiencing it.
Yep.
And so instantly it recalls that autoresponder of me being told when I was a kid that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't a good person.
Mm-hmm.
And I reacted, anger instantly came, adrenaline flooded my bloodstream, and I punched the guy and walked out. And lost my job. That's my level of anger was like way over the top.
Wow.
And that happened not because he was trying to correct me or show me a better way of doing something. It happened because I was 8-year-old Mark hearing that I was a loser.
Yeah.
And so that's what triggered the autoresponder. So how do we fix that?
Yeah.
Well, in the moment, there's a little thing I say, stop, drop, and roll. So when you're on fire, fire of anger is hitting you, you stop, drop, and roll. What does that mean? It means you want to ask yourself a question, because if you can activate the prefrontal cortex, it'll send a message to the neurocortex saying, whoa, 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 everything's okay here. We're figuring it out. Yeah. And it'll release dopamine into the reptilian part of your brain. And it'll actually just, okay, we'll see what happens here.
Douses the fire.
Douses the fire. So if you can ask yourself that question. So what do? We stop, drop, and roll. We stop what we're doing. We stop escalating, stop trying to, just stop. And then what you want to do is drop whatever offense has happened, whatever's going on, and ask yourself a question. What do I need to do right now to be okay? Or even better, what do I need to do right now to be the kind of man I know I'm supposed to be?
Oh, yeah. Well, that changes everything, doesn't it?
It does.
You reframe that. You put that question in front of an
I
action.
had to do that. I had to put that into practice. And what happened is my answer was, I want to be an encourager. If I continue down this moment, I'm not going to be encouraging.
I'm not living the way
I'm not living who I am. I'm not the kind of person I want to be. And so it takes practice, but it is something you can do scientifically to arrest your brain, is to ask yourself a question in the midst. If you have somebody who's angry all the time, ask them a question in the midst, and it'll actually make them stop and think, and it'll help calm the situation down. Then you can dissect what happened. What was the cause and effect? What was going on there?
It's so funny you say this. I've said this in another podcast. I said it, with my dad, there was my older sister and my younger brother. I got it less than, and thank goodness my dad, by the way, has conquered that. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, I saw
to
that
say
episode
that.
of your dad. Yeah. It was awesome.
It's crazy that where he was to what he is now. It's unbelievable. But that's what I used to do. Right. I used to get curious, and I used to ask him, even when he was in a rage, I used to ask him a question. Right. And he would be angry or whatever, but he would answer the question. I'd ask another question, and it would calm him down. And that was my little mechanism.
That was your hack.
That was my hack at the time. Yeah. And I didn't know it.
Yeah.
But now watching my dad, if ever I see my dad start to get frustrated, because it happens sometimes still, like it doesn't change,
me too.
Yeah. Yeah. But I watch him ask himself a question. Like I literally will watch him do it. Like he'll process something, he'll do, and then he comes from a different direction. And it's amazing to watch that. And it's amazing how people can do that. you have gotten to the place that you're at right now because you came from a much different place. You've alluded to it.
Yeah.
I can imagine you had a few different moments of clarity that when you realized that you're living your best life, for lack of a better term, when you are an encourager.
My life was out of control.
Yeah.
I had addiction issues. I always worked hard and I partied hard. Part of my childhood developed in me was the ability to give up on things too easly.
Okay.
And the reason that happened
it's not going
is
easy. I'm
not
going to do it.
I was going to fail anyway.
Yeah.
So what's the point?
Yeah.
So I didn't finish school. And to this day, I have a grade 8 education.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't finish school. And so I went
and he's an author, kids.
Yes.
Like,
just by the way, yes. And I've obviously been able to recapture things in my life. And so, but the point is that I, because of that, I always had to just work sales jobs or work jobs where I could labor or where I could make money. And I always had the gift of gab. And so I was able to always do good in sales and in those kinds of environments. But I also partied a lot, and I drank and I did drugs, and I got into a really steep cocaine addiction. Mm-hmm. And when my wife and I we met in a bar, and it was very toxic from the very beginning. There was an attraction, a really strong attraction, but not much substance beyond that. Yep. And so we just kind of connected, and I got her pregnant. Yep. And this is how romantic I am, man. I actually I phoned her up and said, she phoned me and said at work and said, I'm pregnant. And I said, oh, I guess we better get married.
Yeah. Hell of a proposal.
It was something within me said I need to do the right thing and give this kid a name. I don't know where maybe that's from the good part of my upbringing. I don't know, but I had this overwhelming sense of responsibility. So we got married. Yep. I didn't know if I loved her. I don't know if she loved me, but we got married. And boy, the first years were just hell. And what happened is my addiction, the more, the anger was just overwhelming, and I'd get angry. And
did the addiction curb it? Did it kind of take the edge off of it? Is that
what
your addiction? Did it take the edge off the anger?
I was self-medicating.
Yeah.
Actually, interestingly enough, I was more of a happy drunk than I was a angry drunk. So it actually did work for me in that sense, but drugs didn't. Cocaine,
that's a short-term
high
deal,
and then you'd crash. And that crash, I was just turned into a monster. And so what happened is I had taught Justin. You interviewed Justin here. We said at the top of the show here, and he was about maybe two. He wasn't sure on his feet yet, so we'll put it that he was around that age. I don't know exact age. Yep. And I had taught him how to get me a beer off the bottom shelf of the fridge, and he would bring it to me, waddling over and hand it to me. And this one night, and I'm not proud to say this, but I would do drugs in front of him. I had no conscience that way. Yeah. And I absolutely was doing lines, and it was all set up, and I asked him to go get me a beer. He walks back, he trips, and the beer ruins the cocaine, spilled all over the table. And I backhanded him, and he just flew across the room, didn't cry, didn't say anything, got up, went and got another one, walked up to me with alligator tears running down his cheeks and said, I'm sorry, Daddy. I could hardly talk at the time. Sorry.
You told me that story.
And it rocked me to the core. Yeah. And the thing that came to my mind in that moment was, what am I doing to this child? What am I doing? I'm not, I don't want to be my father. My dad was not an addict. He was a minister, but he was angry. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to be my father. And I'm trying to, but then I realized, but regardless of my father's faults when I was young, we, by the way, reconciled before he passed on. It was great. Yeah. And he took full responsibility. But it was but I didn't have to deal with addiction. I didn't have to deal with those kinds of things in my home, just the anger and the results of it. And I thought to myself, what am I doing to this kid? He's such a great kid. Justin, from a little boy, was just an amazing young man. And he still is. He's an amazing man awesome, today. And my girls too, they're just amazing people. They're amazing human beings. But it was that catalyst moment that I realized a lot of times we have to go through a very difficult time. I want to just say that even to some of the guys that are listening right now.
Yep.
If you're in the middle of the worst storm of your life, it's a perfect opportunity to do what we've been talking about today. Don't be defeated. Don't let it overwhelm you. Don't let it hurt you. Don't let it kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let it create some self-harm in your life. But please, please do this process. Ask yourself those hard questions.
Absolutely.
Ask yourself those things and find out your self-worth and what your purpose is, and be intentional. And what happened was, it didn't all end there,
No.
but it was the beginning, and it was the moment that I realized where I was. It was almost like waking out of a daze
Yeah.
and realizing I got to do better.
Yeah.
And it was shortly after that Sandy and I split up.
Mm-hmm.
She was working full time. I was working full time, and I got transferred to this other province, and from BC to Saskatchewan. And I dropped Justin off at my parents' place because we couldn't look after him. I was too much of a mess in trying to figure out this new job. She was a mess because she worked full time, and midnights most. And by the way, Denny's in West Broadway, which is like the most violent part of the city, like at that time, it was just like crazy. Expo 86 was happening, and it was just like all night Denny's, and she worked their night shift. Oh. And so I dropped Justin off, and I remember driving away thinking, oh, my family is devastated. Like, this is devastating to me. And Sandy didn't tell me, but she had already made up her mind. She was not going to come with me. I was going off to start and get us settled in that end, but she was not. She was done with my addiction and done with me. And so what happened is I was on my way to Saskatchewan. I stayed with friends of my parents overnight in Calgary, and they were going to a church service, and I wanted nothing to do with it. Yeah, absolutely nothing to do with it. But I was staying there, and they invited me over and over and over. And that night, there was a guy that was speaking that just shared it was hitting my heart. It was like, it was all about purpose and intention and all the things we're talking about today. There was just some of those pieces were there and I realized, I don't know my purpose. I don't have it. And so it was another part of my journey. The next day I'm driving, and I'm like really feeling convicted now. And now I'm having an experience spiritually. I'm having a real spiritual experience. And I was either going to, I felt like, it sounds funny, but I was going to either run to the altar or I was going to run out. And I ran out because I wasn't going to be a fool and running to the altar. And so I ended up running out. But then the very next week I get to Regina, and again, I'm staying with friends of my parents. I could have stayed, the company would have paid for a hotel, but they said, oh, you get home cooked meals, whatever. Yeah. And the guy invited me to a businessmen's breakfast. He said, it's for businessmen. You're opening a retail store up for your company. Yep. It was clothes and stuff. And so why don't you come and meet people? And again, a guy gets up and starts sharing his story, and it's my story. And it's like impacting me deeply. So again, I was going to either like give in or give up. Right now, I was at that end of myself moment. And that's where I just conceded and said, I need God in my life. I don't know what that means. No idea, but I'm helpless. I'm helpless. I need help. That's right. That's my first step, is admit. And so I admitted I needed help. I needed a higher power. I needed help from above, whatever you want to put it. And what happened is I had a real spiritual encounter in that moment that was very profound. And I cried like a baby. Mm-hmm. All the years of pain and anger and frustration and all the things that I bottled just started pouring out of my eyes. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't explain. I felt like a fool. By the time I was done, like most of the men were gone. And it was just a few that stayed with me. And so now I got to phone Sandy and tell her about this experience. And I was talking to the gentleman that had taken me, and I said, I don't know how to tell her this. Like, we have no experience with spiritual things like in our lives, and her even less. I grew up in a minister's home, but so I knew the basics, but all she's ever known of it is my bitterness. And so how am I going to explain this? And he said, well, sometimes you just got to say what you need to say. Yeah. Is it going to get worse? no, can't be worse than it is. So anyway, I called her up at about 2 p.m. Now, remember, I'm Saskatchewan time. She's BC time.
Yeah.
And I tell her what happened. And I said, I don't know what it means. I have no idea, but I had a spiritual experience. I am done with drugs. I am done with alcohol. I'm done. And I have not touched anything since that day. I've not had one drink. I've not had one drug. I don't even like taking pain meds if I have, the flu. And I've not even had a desire. Now, I still went through recovery. I still went through, the steps and did all the hard work, but I have not touched it since that day. It was miraculous to me because the desire went away, because I finally discovered I had purpose and I had value. I didn't need the medication anymore, right? So anyway, I'm telling her and she starts crying on the other end. Now, my wife was not a crier. She was a tough girl. And she started crying on the other end. And what happened is she said, I had an experience this morning. Your dad had called me to check in on me, and he had told me about God. And she said, I realized my life was out of control and I admitted I needed help. We worked out the time. It was the same half hour.
Yeah. See, that's just.
I said, pack up, move out here. Let's try this thing again. And we did. And it was a few more years of a lot of hard work, a lot of healing journey, a lot of counseling, a lot of fighting, a lot of people standing with us, a lot of people encouraging us. But I'm so grateful that the result has been now I get to do that for others.
Yeah, that's
so there's hope, guys. That's the thing. No matter how we're feeling in a moment, there is hope. Don't give up. Don't give up.
When you told me that story about Justin, ironically, we were in a bar. We had just watched, or just about to watch Justin.
Yeah, we were just about to watch Proper Man. Yeah,
Proper Man play, and it absolutely, floored me, that story. And there's so many people who can relate to so many elements of your story, of that hopelessness. I love don't give up hope. Absolutely. Yeah. The no way out.
Yeah.
And it's funny how it can come out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. But you have to be open enough to see that. If you're tunnel vision, you're not going to see the things that are flying by you. That's why you gotta open up your field of vision a little bit. And so many times we tighten up so much that we don't see that.
And one way of doing that is to ask for help.
Yes.
We can't do this alone. We were never designed as a human race to do it alone. We need each other. Mm-hmm. Yet when we have negative experiences growing up, we do pull in. We think we got to control it. We have to do it on our own. We don't rely on anybody. I don't trust anybody. It goes on and on. That's couldn't be further from the truth.
No.
We absolutely. Now, I'm not saying everybody. I'm saying find the few. I would say find yourself a circle of support. Find yourself some cheerleaders in your life that will come alongside and cheerlead you no matter what's going on. And men especially need that. Women tend to have friends and they can get that support. It's not always healthy, but if it is healthy, it's really healthy.
It releases some of that tension or whatever that's there. Though, whereas guys, this is part of the reason why HeChange exists.
Right.
Is because that doesn't intrinsically exist the way that it does with women typically.
Right. And I think that's why I love HeChanged. That's why I'm on board with it, because if we can provide ways for guys to ask for help that's safe, then that's great. And that's a lot of my clients come through referrals because I'm a safe place for that.
Yeah.
And I can reframe maybe some of the way they're thinking. I can reframe it to the way we've been doing today. And I always say it's way simpler than you think.
Yeah.
But it's not easy. But it is simple.
Well, it's funny, talking about reframing how we think about ourselves. And I'm super curious about this. I want to get to, I go so quick. Like I knew it would disappear. Yeah. I knew it would disappear when we started doing this. But there is something I want to hit, talking about how we can reframe things so easily. And about how we treat ourselves and how we think of ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's super relatable. And I wanted to throw it at you. You think about, I want you to picture, and those who are viewing or listening, picture a good friend of someone you really care about, someone you really, really care about, like with your heart, like you just,
Yeah.
you know, it could be one of your kids, could be a family member, it could be a friend, could be your partner, whatever. Think of someone you really care about, and now imagine them in distress.
Right.
Something just happened to them, and they're in pain. How do you feel towards them? What would you want to do? And I mean, typically people would say, of course, well, I care for them. I love them. Oh my goodness. What can I do to help? I want to help. I want to help. Right. Okay. Now take that same distress, but imagine yourself feeling it.
Right.
How do you feel about yourself? And so many times for whatever reason, you start piling on yourself. You go the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite of empathy. You don't feel empathy towards yourself.
Right.
Why would you treat them that way, but not treat yourself in the same way? Now imagine you treating yourself the same way. Imagine you giving yourself that same gentleness, that same help, that same compassion and empathy. Suddenly you can reframe anytime that you're feeling bad. If you can have that interrupt moment and say, okay, I'm going to treat myself like I treat my best friend or my partner or my kid or whatever.
Right.
Suddenly you're now learning the trick about treating yourself better and about loving yourself. You're actually learning to do that with that one simple little reframe.
Right. And also, I think if you really use the same illustration, when you've responded to somebody in crisis and they've responded, how did it feel?
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
How did it feel?
Absolutely.
How did you feel about yourself? How did you feel about the situation? You were probably very grateful you got the opportunity to actually help them. Well, why would you rob somebody else of that same opportunity if you need help?
Exactly.
Like, it's not, listen, not asking for help is a pride issue. It's nothing more than a pride issue. It's pure arrogance not to ask for help. And I'm sorry to be tough. I know when you're feeling, but remember, pride either puffs up or covers up.
Yeah.
And so covering up is you bury yourself. You just isolate yourself. That's cover up. Puff up is like you put on a persona like you're okay and everything's all right and I don't need help. Neither one of those works for you.
No, they don't serve.
They don't serve you well.
Yeah.
And they actually hurt you. And they will make you feel more isolated. And then we go into spiral. And so, yes, that's a great illustration. I agree with you 100%. Think that through.
And you can just reframe it. But again, it goes back, and we're going to finish how we started. It goes back to intention. You're being intentional about it. You're actually analyzing how you're thinking about yourself versus how you think about someone else, or vice versa, right? You got your hands on the wheel now as opposed to the autopilot.
Yeah.
What's the best way for people to find you, to find your book, to see? Because I mean, obviously you're online as well, and you do this as well. You're a podcaster as well. So what's the best way for people to find you?
markgordon.ca. My name is the best way, and on there it has all my social links. And I have online courses there. The shadow boxing's on there, and other things. And then also you can reach out to me through that, or book appointments on my calendar. We can have a 15-minute, 30-minute chat, just see if there's a match, if I can help. But yeah, if I can, that's how you get a hold of me. But I just want to encourage the guys out there. Relationships are not as scary as you've found them to be.
No.
You just got to be intentional and build that relationship with yourself first, and then start building relationships with others. And it's never too late. My wife and I were separated, and she was done with me, but we were able to work through all of that and still get back together. Now, that's maybe not everybody's story, but I'm just saying as long as you keep hope, there is steps you can take forward. As soon as you lose hope, and hope deferred makes a heart sick. It's an old proverb. Hope deferred makes a heart sick. And so when you lose hope, you lose everything. So if you're going to fight for something, if all you got energy for one thing, find hope, fight for that hope. And then you can start building on that, and it'll help. And for me, a higher power was God. Obviously, faith is a real big piece of this for men, especially. And it's the hardest thing for men sometimes to do that, because it requires humility. It's not always easy.
Yeah. But like you said, I'm helpless. I need help.
Yeah.
Getting to that place, and I mean, not to get too woo woo or too spiritual about it or whatever, but like, if you need help and you ask for help, just do it and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then be willing to look for it. to look for,
Yeah.
see how it happens. It might be that friend across the street that you wouldn't have seen otherwise because
Right.
you were whatever that looks like. It might be, you never know. It might be the next
Yeah.
phone call that comes in, whatever. But being able to shed the armor of the heavy
Yeah.
armor of saying I'm okay when
Yeah.
you know you're not okay.
Yeah.
Being able to say I'm not okay. I need help to be okay.
That's right.
And see what happens.
Yeah.
And then there are ways to do it.
What do you have
Message
to lose?
Mark. Message
Yeah.
Mark. There. We're giving you a way out right there.
Right.
But yeah, just get to that place where humility can win the day, and
Right.
it will win the day.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, and the name of the book's Relationship Matters.
Yep.
That's kind of a play on the name, right? Like they matter, but it's also about relationship matters.
Yeah.
And also the
Perfect title.
podcast is by the same name. And I want to have you on it.
Yeah.
and
Anytime. We'll
talk
do a little
more.
podcast do-si-do. We'll
Yeah,
do it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's do it.
And it's just all about different kinds of relationships, but it's really just around how to have healthy ones.
I can't thank you enough for allowing me to take advantage of our friendship and our dynamic to have you on here to do this. And
Thanks,
as He
Mike.
Changed It grows, you're going to be a part of it, and
Yeah.
we're so excited about that. And it all came from the genesis of this was seeing a rock and roll show that I just absolutely was floored by, and that's where the relationship with
Yeah.
Proper Man came from. That's how I met Justin. Then it just moved over to you,
Yeah.
and it's just it all started with the love of music and how it turned into this. I cannot thank you enough for being in my life. Thank you so much for coming on HeCast today.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here and having the opportunity to encourage men.
Oh, anytime, brother. They go by pretty darn quick. This is why we do the show. It's just for conversations like this. If you're out there and you've seen or heard this, and it's twigged something, then please go ahead and do something about that. Don't ignore that. If there's something there that's it, if we've brought up some earth and don't ignore it. Let's figure out what it is. And can't thank you enough for watching, listening, whatever it is. Thank you so much for supporting He Changed It. Please like, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And this has been another episode of HeCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. My name is Mike Chisholm. Go change something.